remember that night like it just happened yesterday. The house was quiet in a way that felt wrong, like it was holding its breath. I had arrived around 7, the sun long gone behind thick clouds, and the street was empty except for the occasional rustle of leaves against the cracked pavement. The parents smiled when they left, all cheery instructions and last-minute reminders, but their eyes had a sort of detached calm, like they were leaving me somewhere I shouldn't be. The house smelled faintly of bleach and something sweet, cookies maybe, but the sweetness didn't feel comforting, more like it was covering something else. The first hour was normal enough. I fed the kids, helped them with homework, and tried to make small talk with the youngest who kept tugging at my sleeve, asking if monsters would come out tonight. I laughed it off, tucked him in, but the feeling didn't leave me. The way the shadows pooled in the corners of the living room, how the hallway seemed to stretch longer than it should, like the house itself was breathing slowly. Then the little thing started. The footsteps upstairs when the kids were asleep, soft and deliberate. A door clicked shut behind me even though I hadn't touched it. My phone buzzed once with a text from an unknown number, blank except for a single, creepy emoji. By 10, the unease had wrapped itself around me like a wet blanket. I tried to focus on the TV to keep my mind busy, but the volume didn't matter because the house had its own sound. The creaks, the whispers of movement that shouldn't exist. I caught glimpses out of the corner of my eye, things that looked like shadows lingering just long enough to make me jump. And then I realized the front door, which I had locked myself, was slightly ajar. I hadn't unlocked it. My chest tightened as I went to check, and that's when I heard it, a low, almost deliberate breathing from the hallway. I froze, trying to tell myself it was just my imagination. But the sound didn't stop. It followed me, slow and rhythmic, almost patient, like it was waiting for me to notice it. I wanted to call the parents, but my hands were shaking so badly I couldn't hold the phone properly. The kids' rooms were dark, the soft glow of the nightlight casting strange, stretched shadows. I remember thinking, if someone is in this house, they know I'm alone, they know I have no backup. And somewhere deep down, I knew I wasn't going to like what I found if I kept moving. I didn't want to admit it, but I started noticing things that didn't make sense. The youngest, who had seemed so sweet and clingy, kept staring at corners of the room like he could see something I couldn't. Sometimes he'd whisper things under his breath, words that didn't sound like anything a 4-year-old should know. And when I asked him to repeat them, he'd just smile, eyes too wide, like he was hiding a secret. The older one was quieter, but I caught him lingering near the windows, peering out as if he was expecting someone. It made me uneasy, but I tried to rationalize. Kids have wild imaginations. I was folding laundry in the living room when I noticed the baby monitor was flickering. The screen was static, then a shadow passed across it. My heart jumped, and I told myself it was probably just interference, that nothing was there. But then I heard a soft thud from upstairs, like something had been dropped, followed by a whisper I couldn't place. I froze in the middle of folding a shirt, staring at the stairwell. The house was so quiet that my own breathing felt loud, intrusive. Then the phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. This time a single sentence, "I'm watching." My hands went cold. I checked every door and window again. All locked. Nothing out of place, at least nothing I could see. My mind started racing. Was it a prank? Someone watching from outside? But the street had been empty for hours. Every creak and sigh of the house now felt amplified, like it was alive and aware of me. I tried to keep myself busy. I made snacks, cleaned, even read a little from the kids' storybooks. But every small noise made me jump. Doors that had been closed now swung open by themselves, the wind, or someone, nudging them just enough. Footsteps followed me from room to room, soft, hesitant, but deliberate. I started whispering to myself, trying to convince myself nothing was wrong, but deep down I knew I wasn't imagining it. And then the older one started acting like a stranger. I asked him to help me bring dishes to the kitchen, and he froze mid-step, staring at the ceiling, whispering again. This time, I swear he said my name, clear and slow. I dropped the plate I was holding. He looked at me calm, almost smug, like he knew something I didn't. The youngest clutched a stuffed animal and just stared at me, wide-eyed, silent. That's when the dread hit me fully. I was in a house where nothing was as it seemed, where the children themselves felt like part of the threat, and I had no one to trust. By midnight, every sound, every shadow had me on edge. The wind rattled the windows, and the monitor picked up faint whispering that didn't match the kids' voices. My stomach was twisted into knots, and my pulse thumped in my ears. Every instinct screamed to leave, but the front door, the one I had locked, wouldn't budge. It was like the house itself had decided I wasn't allowed to go anywhere. And somewhere in that stillness, I realized someone, or something, was moving in a pattern, watching me, testing me, waiting. I was crouched in the living room, heart hammering so loud it felt like it could wake the dead, when I heard it, a soft creak from the hallway leading to the kids' rooms. My breath caught in my throat. The older one had been lying in bed, pretending to sleep, but I could see his eyes, wide and glinting in the darkness. And then the whispering started again, this time closer, unmistakable, coming from the kitchen. I crept toward it, every muscle tensed, every nerve screaming, and when I rounded the corner, I saw him, the older boy, standing perfectly still, staring at the back door. My stomach dropped. He had something in his hand. Not a toy, not one of the kids' things, something sharp, metallic, heavy. I froze, unsure whether to scream or run. Then I realized the youngest was no longer in his room. My chest tightened as I heard a soft giggle behind me, coming from the stairwell. I spun, heart in my throat, and caught a shadow slipping into the hallway. Panic took over. I grabbed the nearest object, a lamp, and swung it blindly. The shadow dissolved, and the giggling stopped. But the silence that replaced it was worse, heavier, like the house itself had swallowed my fear and was holding it, savoring it. The older boy whispered my name again, softer this time, almost sweetly. My hands shook so badly I dropped the lamp, and the clatter made both of them jump. I bolted for the front door, or maybe it was just yanking at the handle, and my heart sank. The lock was jammed, impossibly tight. I slammed my shoulder against it, again and again, until I heard footsteps behind me, deliberate and slow. I turned, and for a brief second, I saw the youngest, standing perfectly still at the top of the stairs, staring down at me with empty eyes, smiling. The older boy was behind him, calm, almost proud. My mind refused to process what I was seeing. The people I was supposed to protect weren't just children anymore. They were something else entirely, something I had walked into completely unprepared for. The room spun. I backed up against the wall, chest heaving, eyes darting. Every instinct screamed escape, but there was nowhere to go. And then I realized they weren't running from me. They were waiting, testing me, enjoying the fear they had created. That's when I understood. The house, the silence, the whispers. It wasn't just haunted by shadows. It was haunted by them. I finally yanked the door open, shoving myself into the cold night air, my legs trembling so badly I could barely run. The street was still empty, silent except for the distant hum of a car somewhere down the road. I didn't stop until I reached a neighbor's house, pounding on the door until someone answered. My voice was shaking, incoherent, spilling out fragments of what had happened. The police arrived quickly after that. I led them back to the house, but the moment we stepped inside, the children were gone. The rooms were empty, beds neatly made, no sign of any struggle. The back door hung slightly ajar, but beyond that, nothing. I couldn't explain it, and neither could anyone else. I gave my statement over and over, the officers polite but skeptical, and the parents returned hours later, oblivious, cheerful, and completely unaware of the night that had nearly swallowed me whole. For days afterward, I couldn't sleep. Every creak in my apartment made me jump. Shadows clung to the corners like threats. I kept replaying the older boy's eyes, the youngest smile at the top of the stairs, their quiet, terrifying composure. Part of me kept thinking I imagined it, but the bruises on my arms from banging into walls, the lamp I'd dropped, the scratches on the door, all of it was real. I never went back to babysitting. The memory stayed, a weight in my chest I couldn't shake. Every time I see a dark hallway or hear the faintest whisper, I remember that night, and I remember that some dangers don't scream. They wait, calm, patient, watching you from the corners. Even now, years later, the memory hits me in the quietest moments, when the house is dark, when my apartment is silent, when I'm alone. I still see their eyes, calm and knowing, and I still hear that whisper, low and deliberate, echoing in my mind. It's not just fear I carry from that night, it's a sense of betrayal. How the parents left me in that house, trusting me to protect their children, unaware that the danger wasn't outside. The ones I thought I could protect were the ones I should have feared the most. I sometimes wonder if they ever noticed what they did, if they ever realized how close I came to something I can't even explain. Did they see the way their children watched me, tested me, played with the boundaries of fear? Or was it just another night in their perfect, orderly house, a night that meant nothing to them while it almost broke me? I don't babysit anymore. I can't. The idea of stepping into another house, trusting another family, feels impossible. And yet, a part of me is still on edge, waiting for that sense of being watched, for the calm, deliberate eyes from the corners of a room. Sometimes I wonder, If I had stayed a little longer, or turned my back for a second, would I still be here? The house is gone now, sold to a new family, clean and cheerful on the outside. But I know some parts of it, some quiet, patient parts, stayed behind. And I know they stayed too, waiting. Watching. I remember the night like it had burned itself into my mind. It was raining hard, the kind of rain that turned streets slick and empty, and I was supposed to babysit for a family I barely knew. Their house was on the edge of town, down a narrow, twisting lane where the streetlights flickered and the shadows pooled. The parents left in a hurry, barely looking at me as they handed over instructions. The kids were supposed to be asleep already, but when I stepped inside, I found the younger one sitting on the couch, eyes wide, clutching a blanket like it was a lifeline. The living room smelled faintly of damp wood and something metallic, like iron. I told myself it was just the rain dripping in, but a chill ran down my spine. The older child didn't appear at first, and when he finally came down the stairs, he didn't say a word. He just watched me, standing at the edge of the hallway, shoulders stiff, eyes sharp. There was something about the way he tilted his head, like he was studying me, weighing me. At first, I tried to keep it normal. We watched a bit of TV, I asked them about school, and helped the younger one with a snack. But then the rain got louder, hammering against the windows in uneven bursts, and I thought I heard the faintest footsteps above us. I froze. The house was old, every board creaked, but these weren't ordinary creaks. These were deliberate, slow, like someone was moving carefully, deliberately watching me from the shadows. I remember thinking I was imagining it, trying to laugh it off, but then I caught the older boy's reflection in the window. He wasn't sitting on the couch anymore. He was behind me, standing there perfectly still, smiling in a way that made my stomach twist. And that's when the unease hit me fully. I wasn't alone in this house, and something about the way they were acting told me they knew it. The house felt alive after that, like every shadow was leaning in to watch me. I kept trying to focus on the younger one, distracting him with a story, but his attention kept snapping to the corners of the room, to places where I couldn't see anything. The older boy moved quietly now, almost too quietly, gliding down hallways, appearing and disappearing as if the walls themselves were swallowing him. Every time I glanced at him, he smiled, small and knowing, like he was enjoying some private joke that I wasn't supposed to understand. Then the noises started. A soft tapping from upstairs, a scrape against the kitchen wall, faint whispers that I couldn't place. I tried calling the parents, but my phone had no signal. I texted the number they had left me, nothing. My heart kept jumping at every sound, but when I looked back, the boys were calm, watching me with those unnerving expressions, and that made my stomach twist even more. I went to check the upstairs bedrooms. Everything looked normal at first, the beds made, the lights off, but the older boy was already there, standing perfectly still in the doorway of one of the rooms. His eyes followed me, unblinking, and he tilted his head the same way he had by the window. I froze, and then I realized the younger one was no longer in the living room. My chest tightened. I could hear the faint rustle of his blanket, somewhere behind me, though I couldn't tell where. Panic started creeping in, clawing at my throat. Every instinct screamed that something was wrong, that I was trapped in a house where the people I was supposed to protect were part of the danger. I tried to stay calm, moving slowly from room to room, but the sense of being watched never left me. Every shadow, every creak, every flicker of the old lights made my pulse jump. And then I heard the whisper, soft, deliberate, coming from the hall behind me. It wasn't a child's voice. It was low, almost amused, saying my name in a way that made the blood drain from my face. The older boy's smile widened. I realized then that I had no idea what I was walking into, and that the night wasn't just strange, it was dangerous, and it was far from over. I rounded the corner into the hallway, heart hammering so hard it felt like it would burst through my chest. The older boy was there, standing perfectly still in the middle of the hall, eyes locked on mine, and in his hand was something heavy, a kitchen knife I hadn't noticed before. My stomach dropped, and I froze, every muscle tight with fear. Behind me, I heard the younger one giggling softly, the sound echoing strangely, like it was coming from all directions at once. I tried to back up, my hands shaking, but the hallway felt smaller, tighter, like the walls themselves were closing in. The older boy took a step forward, slow and deliberate, and I could see the calm in his face, the quiet control, and I realized with a chill that he wasn't afraid. He was testing me, seeing how far I would let this go. The younger one's giggle stopped abruptly, and for a moment the house was silent except for my own ragged breathing. Then the whisper came again, low and deliberate. "You can't leave." I turned to run for the front door, but it wouldn't budge. I yanked, slammed my shoulder against it, panic clawing at my throat, but it held firm. Behind me, the older boy moved again, gliding closer, the knife catching the dim light. The younger one appeared at the top of the stairs, watching me with that unnerving, empty smile, like he understood something I didn't. I realized then that the danger wasn't just the knife or the shadows. It was them, calm, deliberate, knowing. I stumbled back, chest heaving, eyes darting for an escape, and the house seemed to pulse around me, alive with their quiet menace. Every instinct screamed to flee, but there was nowhere to go. The older boy whispered my name again, almost gently, and I knew they weren't just children tonight. They were predators, and I was the one trapped. I finally yanked at the door one last time, and with a sudden jerk it swung open. Rain poured in, drenching me instantly, and I stumbled onto the slick driveway, gasping, heart hammering so violently I could barely think. I ran without looking back, pounding on a neighbor's door until someone finally answered. My words tumbled out in a mess of panic and fear, barely coherent, and they called the police. And we went back to the house. It was empty. The kids were nowhere to be found. Their beds were neatly made, the doors locked from the inside, nothing to indicate any struggle. I gave my statement over and over, but the parents arrived hours later, cheerful, oblivious, asking if everything had been okay. They didn't notice the fear etched across my face, the way my hands shook, or the lingering dread that clung to me like a shadow. For days afterward, I couldn't sleep. Every floorboard that creaked, every shadow in my apartment made me jump. I kept replaying the older boy's calm, deliberate movements, the younger one's empty, eerie smile, the way they had watched me. I couldn't tell anyone exactly what happened without sounding insane, so I bottled it up, but the memory haunted me. I never babysat again. The idea of stepping into another house, trusting another family, terrified me. And sometimes, late at night, when it's quiet, I still hear whispers and footsteps that aren't mine. I still see their faces, calm and unafraid, reminding me that some dangers aren't obvious. They wait, patient, watching, and sometimes they vanish before anyone ever believes they were there. Even now, I can't shake that night. It lingers in quiet moments, in the shadows of my apartment, in the way every unfamiliar creak makes me jump. I still see the older boy's calm, assessing eyes, and the younger one's smile, empty and knowing, like they carried a secret I wasn't meant to understand. I keep asking myself how I survived, and the answer never comes. I just know I did, and that alone feels strange, like a mistake that could have been fatal. The parents never noticed anything unusual. To them, it had been a normal night. I've thought about confronting them, warning them, but I know they wouldn't believe me. How could they? What happened was subtle, quiet, almost invisible, and yet it was real. I was left alone with it, and they were left untouched, their children perfectly normal again, hiding a darkness that no one else could see. I don't babysit anymore. I avoid houses, avoid being alone with children I don't know. But the memory never leaves. Sometimes, in the dead of night, I swear I hear the soft shuffle of small footsteps behind me, or the whisper of my name carried on a breeze that shouldn't exist. I wonder if they ever think about that night, or if it meant nothing to them at all. Some dangers don't announce themselves. They don't scream. They wait patiently, watching, and when the right moment comes, they move quietly. That night, I learned how fragile trust can be, and how terrifying the ones you're supposed to protect can really become. I remember sitting on the couch, the TV flickering silently, when I first noticed it. The sound of the wind pushing against the windows wasn't right. The house was supposed to be quiet, just me and the kids for the evening, but the wind sounded heavier, almost deliberate, like it was pressing against the walls from the inside. I had arrived just after 6, the sky dark and bruised with storm clouds. The parents left in a rush, telling me they'd be back soon, smiling and waving like everything was normal. But as soon as the door clicked shut, the house felt wrong. The younger one was already in pajamas, sitting cross-legged on the floor, quietly lining up his toys, his head tilting unnaturally as he watched me move around. The older child didn't come downstairs right away. When he finally appeared, he didn't greet me. He just stood at the top of the stairs, leaning on the railing, eyes sharp, following my every move. I tried to make small talk, but every word felt hollow, like it bounced off invisible walls. It started subtly. A door I had closed earlier was now slightly ajar. A toy I hadn't touched was moved across the floor. And then I heard it, a soft shuffle from upstairs, too deliberate to be the wind. My pulse quickened, but when I called out to the children, their heads snapped toward me, perfectly synchronized, eyes wide, innocent. But something about that innocence didn't feel right. I tried to laugh it off, telling myself the storm was playing tricks on my mind. But then I noticed the older boy standing behind me in the reflection of the TV, a faint, unnerving smile curling across his face. That's when the first real wave of fear hit me. I wasn't just responsible for watching the children. I was responsible for surviving the night. The night stretched on, and the storm outside only made the house feel smaller, tighter, like it was pressing in around me. The younger one stayed on the floor, quiet now, eyes darting toward every corner of the living room. I kept thinking he was just nervous about the storm, but the way he tilted his head, watching me with those wide, unblinking eyes, made my skin crawl. The older boy moved differently, almost silently, appearing and disappearing in ways that didn't make sense. One moment he was at the top of the stairs, the next at the kitchen doorway, and I swore I saw him behind me in a mirror I hadn't looked at before. Then the little things started happening. A glass on the counter I hadn't touched was now on the floor, lying in a neat but impossible position. A chair was turned just slightly, as if someone had been sitting there watching me. I tried calling the parents, but there was no answer. My phone buzzed once with a blank text from an unknown number. My chest tightened, and I felt a pit of dread in my stomach. Whoever, or whatever, was here knew I was alone. Every sound made me jump. The creak of the stairs, the soft tapping of rain against the windows, even the thud of the kids' feet moving across the floor. I tried to stay busy, cleaning up a spill, organizing toys, anything to keep my mind occupied. But the sense of being watched never left. I caught the older boy staring at me from the hallway, calm, silent, and it made my stomach churn. The younger one whispered something I couldn't understand, his voice too soft, too precise, like he was repeating words he'd been taught but shouldn't know. By midnight, the tension had become unbearable. Every instinct screamed at me that something was wrong, that I was trapped in a house where the children themselves were part of the threat. And then I realized, the house wasn't just a backdrop for my fear. It was part of it, every shadow, every creak, every flicker of light amplifying the terror that the two kids were silently orchestrating around me. I froze when I heard it, a slow, deliberate step coming from upstairs. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might give me away. The older boy was there, standing at the top of the stairs, a faint smile on his face that made my stomach twist. In his hand was something sharp, glinting in the dim light, and I realized with a jolt that he wasn't just playing anymore. The younger one appeared beside him, clutching a small object tightly, eyes wide and calm at the same time, like they both understood something I didn't. I tried to back away, hands shaking, but the hallway felt smaller, tighter, as if the walls themselves were closing in. The whisper came next, low and deliberate, my name, drawn out, chillingly calm. My chest tightened, panic clawing at me, as I saw the older boy step forward, deliberate, measured, testing me, seeing how far I would go. The younger one giggled softly, the sound echoing unnaturally in the quiet house. I lunged for the front door, yanking at the handle, but it wouldn't budge. My mind raced as I realized there was no simple escape. The older boy moved toward me, calm, almost proud, while the younger one stood at the top of the stairs, smiling in that eerie, empty way. Every instinct screamed at me to run, chest heaving, eyes darting around, and the house seemed to pulse with their quiet menace. Every shadow, every corner, every flicker of the storm-lit windows became a potential threat. And then it hit me, they weren't children that night. They were predators, and I was trapped, powerless, caught in a calculated game I hadn't agreed to play. I finally slammed the door open and stumbled out into the rain, drenched and shaking, my legs barely holding me up. I ran down the slick driveway without looking back, pounding on the nearest neighbor's door until someone answered. I couldn't speak clearly, words tumbling out in a frantic mess, telling fragments of what had happened. They called the police, and I huddled on the porch, trembling, heart still hammering. When the officers arrived and we went back to the house, it was empty. The kids were gone. The beds were neatly made, the rooms quiet, the front door locked from the inside. Nothing made sense. I gave my statement over and over, but no one seemed to fully grasp what I had seen, or maybe no one wanted to believe it. The parents returned hours later, smiling and cheerful, completely unaware of the night that had almost destroyed me. For days, I couldn't sleep. Every creak, every shadow in my apartment set my nerves on edge. I kept seeing the older boy's calm, deliberate movements, the younger one's eerie smile. I tried to tell myself I had imagined it, but the memory felt too vivid, too precise. My hands still shook when I thought about the knife, the whispers, the way they had stalked me with that quiet, terrifying patience. I never babysat again. I avoided houses, avoided being alone with kids I didn't know. But the memory didn't fade. Sometimes late at night, I swear I hear soft footsteps or whispers that aren't mine, and I feel their eyes on me, calm and unblinking, reminding me that some dangers wait quietly, patiently, and strike when you least expect it. Even now, I can feel that night lingering in the corners of my mind. The older boy's calculating eyes, the younger one's empty, unnerving smile. They haunt me in quiet moments. I keep asking myself how I survived, and the answer never comes. I just know I did, and somehow that feels wrong, like I escaped a danger that should have taken me. The parents never seemed to notice anything. To them, it was just a normal night. I've thought about telling them exactly what happened, warning them, but I know they wouldn't understand. How could they? The danger was subtle, patient, almost invisible, and yet it was very real. I was left alone with it, and they walked away thinking everything was fine. I don't babysit anymore. I avoid houses, avoid being alone with children I don't know. But the memory never leaves. Sometimes, when it's quiet, I swear I hear footsteps following me, soft whispers that carry my name. I wonder if they ever think about that night, or if it meant nothing to them at all. Some dangers don't announce themselves. They don't scream. They wait, quietly, patiently, watching, and when the right moment comes, they move. That night taught me how fragile trust can be, and how terrifying the ones you are supposed to protect can really become. I remember the moment I realized something was wrong, though at first it seemed small, insignificant. I had just arrived at the house, a sprawling, older home on a quiet cul-de-sac, just after 6 in the evening. The parents were in a rush, leaving detailed instructions but speaking so fast I barely registered half of it. The kids were supposed to be asleep, but when I stepped inside, the younger one was in the hallway, standing perfectly still, staring at the ceiling like he was listening to something I couldn't hear. The older child didn't appear at first. When he finally came down the stairs, he didn't smile, didn't wave. He just watched me from the top step, eyes sharp and unnerving, like he was measuring me, testing me. I tried small talk, but the words felt awkward and hollow. There was something about the house that made every sound feel amplified. The hum of the fridge, the creak of the floorboards, even the wind brushing against the windows. At first, I brushed it off. Maybe the kids were just restless. Maybe the old house was just settling. But then I noticed little things. A door I had closed was now slightly open. A toy that had been on the floor was on the counter. And the older boy's eyes, calm, calculating, too aware, never left me. The younger one whispered something under his breath, soft and deliberate, and the words made my stomach twist. I turned toward the staircase, only to see the older boy's reflection in the window. He wasn't in the room behind me, yet his eyes followed mine perfectly. That's when I realized I wasn't just responsible for watching these kids. I was responsible for surviving the night. The night stretched on, and every little sound made my nerves jump. The younger one stayed close, but his attention wasn't on me. It was on the corners of the room, the shadows that seemed too long, too still. Every so often, he whispered something I couldn't understand, his voice calm, deliberate, like he was repeating words he'd been taught to keep secret. I tried to distract him with a story, a game, anything to break the eerie silence, but it didn't work. The older boy moved differently. He glided through the house silently, appearing in doorways I hadn't seen him approach, disappearing and reappearing so quickly it felt like the walls themselves were swallowing him. I caught glimpses of him in mirrors, in reflections, always watching, always calm. Every time our eyes met, a chill ran through me, a feeling that he knew exactly what I was thinking, exactly what I feared. Then the small, subtle signs began to escalate. A chair in the kitchen was turned slightly, though I hadn't touched it. A glass on the counter I was sure I had cleaned earlier now lay shattered on the floor, shards perfectly arranged, almost intentional. I checked the doors and windows, locked, but the sense of being trapped didn't go away. My phone had no signal, the parents unreachable, and every instinct in me screamed that something was very wrong. By 10 o'clock, my anxiety had climbed to panic. The wind rattled the windows, and the house seemed to groan and sigh around me. Every creak, every shadow felt deliberate. The older boy whispered my name once, softly, almost sweetly, and my stomach twisted. The younger one giggled behind me, just at the top of the stairs, calm and unnerving, like he understood something I didn't. I realized then that the danger wasn't outside. It had always been inside, quiet, patient, watching me, and I had no idea how far it would go before I realized I was already trapped. I froze when I heard it, a slow, deliberate step from the hallway behind me. My heart was hammering so hard it felt like it would burst. The older boy stood there calm, watching me with that unnerving, measured gaze. In his hand was something heavy, metallic, catching the dim light. My stomach dropped. The younger one appeared at the top of the stairs, smiling faintly, clutching a small object like he was in on some cruel joke. I backed up instinctively, but the hallway felt narrower, tighter, like the walls themselves were pressing in. The whisper came next, low and deliberate, my name. Panic surged through me, and I realized that they weren't scared. They were testing me, enjoying the fear, moving quietly, deliberately like predators circling prey. I ran for the front door, yanking at the handle, but it wouldn't budge. I slammed my shoulder against it, again and again, heart hammering, mind racing. The older boy stepped closer, calm, composed, while the younger one stayed at the top of the stairs, watching, smiling in that empty, precise way that made my blood run cold. Every instinct screamed to escape, but there was nowhere to go. I stumbled back, gasping for breath, eyes darting around the dimly lit house. Every corner, every shadow, every flicker from the storm outside felt alive with menace. And then it hit me. The danger wasn't just a knife or the storm or the creaking house. It was them. Calm, quiet, patient. Waiting. Testing. And I was trapped in their game, powerless, completely at their mercy. I finally yanked the front door open, stumbling out into the pouring rain, drenched and shaking. My legs barely carried me as I ran down the slick driveway and pounded on a neighbor's door until someone answered. I couldn't form coherent sentences, words tumbling out in frantic bursts as I tried to explain what had happened. They called the police, and I huddled on the porch, soaked, heart still racing, unable to calm down. When the officers arrived and we returned to the house, it was empty. The kids were gone. Their rooms were neat, the doors locked from the inside, no sign of struggle, no trace of anyone. I gave my statement repeatedly, but no one seemed to fully grasp, or perhaps believe, what I had experienced. The parents arrived hours later, smiling and cheerful, completely unaware of the nightmare that had almost consumed. Every floorboard creak, every shadow in my apartment, set my nerves on edge. I kept seeing the older boy's calm, precise movements, and the younger one's empty, unnerving smile. I couldn't tell anyone exactly what happened without sounding crazy, so I bottled it up. But the memory stayed, vivid and relentless. The knife, the whispers, the calculated way they had stalked me, testing me. I never babysat again. I avoided houses, avoided being alone with children I didn't know. But even now, the memory lingers. Sometimes, in the dead of night, I swear I hear soft footsteps or whispers that aren't mine. I feel their eyes on me, calm, unblinking, reminding me that some dangers wait quietly, patiently, and strike when you least expect them. I still think about that night more than I should. I replay the sounds, the looks, the way the house felt like it was closing in on me the moment the parents left. People always assume danger comes from outside, from strangers breaking in, from shadows on the street, from the unknown. But I learned that sometimes the threat is already standing in front of you, smiling, silent, pretending to be harmless. No one ever followed up on what happened. The police brushed it off as panic or misunderstanding. The parents insisted the boys were shy and socially unique, whatever that meant. They barely acknowledged how shaken I was. I wondered if this had happened before, if maybe other babysitters had run into the same problem, and also walked away with no proof except the fear still trapped under their skin. That's the part that sits with me the most. The uncertainty. The realization that I was alone in that house with two children who seemed to understand fear better than most adults I'd ever met. They didn't yell or threaten. They didn't need to. Their calm was more terrifying than any screaming could have been. It was like they knew exactly how to push someone to the edge without leaving a single mark the world could see. Some nights, when everything is silent and the lights are off, I think about the older boy's eyes, steady, patient, filled with something I still can't explain. I wonder what they would have done if I hadn't escaped. If I had kept playing along. If they would have taken it one step further. And sometimes I get stuck on an even worse thought. Maybe the parents knew. Maybe that was why they left in such a hurry. Maybe that was why the kids had rules no one talked about. I'll never know. But I learned something that night. Evil doesn't always look like a monster. Sometimes it looks like a child, waiting quietly in the dark, just to see what you'll do. I remember pulling into the driveway, the sun long gone and the streetlights flickering like they were struggling to stay on. The parents were running late, leaving me with two kids I'd never met before and a house that felt wrong. The exterior looked normal enough, But as soon as I stepped inside, I felt the cold, empty air press against me. The younger child was sitting at the kitchen table, coloring silently, eyes too focused, not blinking as I entered. The older one didn't appear immediately. When he finally came down the stairs, he didn't speak. He just stood in the doorway, leaning on the railing, watching me move around the room. His gaze was sharp, unnerving, like he was cataloging everything about me, my movements, my expressions, even the way I breathed. I tried smiling, tried small talk, but it felt awkward and forced. He didn't respond. He just observed, silently, patiently. At first, I thought I was imagining it. Maybe I was just anxious. Maybe the house was old and made me uneasy. But then I noticed the little things. The toys the younger child had been using were now lined up perfectly on the counter. A chair was turned slightly, even though I had left it pushed in. And that stare, the older child's gaze, never left me. The younger one whispered something under his breath, something deliberate, too precise for a child of his age. I turned toward the stairs, and for a split second, I caught the older boy's reflection in the hallway mirror. He wasn't moving, but it was like he was everywhere at once, watching, testing me. And in that moment, I realized that this wasn't just babysitting. It was survival. The house felt alive that night, and every little sound set my nerves on edge. The younger one stayed close, but his attention wasn't on me. It was on the shadows, the corners, the ceiling, like he could see things I couldn't. He whispered things under his breath that made my stomach twist, soft, deliberate words that sounded rehearsed. I tried to distract him with a game, a story, anything to break the tension, but it didn't work. The older boy moved differently. He didn't run or shout. He glided through the house silently, appearing in doorways I hadn't noticed, vanishing and reappearing so quickly it was disorienting. Every time I saw him in a mirror or a reflection, his eyes were fixed on me, calm, assessing, knowing. It felt like he could read my thoughts, like he was always a step ahead. Then the subtle signs escalated. A chair was slightly out of place. A glass I had just cleaned was on the floor, shattered in a precise pattern. I double-checked the doors and windows, locked, but the sense of being trapped didn't leave me. My phone had no signal, the parents unreachable, and every instinct screamed that something was wrong, that I was already inside a trap. By the time it was past 9, my nerves were taut, my chest tight with panic. The wind rattled the windows, and the house seemed to sigh, groan, and shift around me. Every creak of the floorboards sounded deliberate. The older boy whispered my name softly, almost gently, and the younger one giggled from the top of the stairs, calm and unnerving. I realized then that the danger wasn't outside. It had been inside all along, quiet, patient, and I was already caught in it. I froze when I heard the slow, deliberate step behind me. My heart was hammering so violently it felt like it might explode. The older boy was standing there, calm, watching me with eyes that felt too knowing, too mature for a child. In his hand was something metallic, heavy, glinting faintly in the dim light. My stomach dropped. The younger one appeared at the top of the stairs, smiling faintly, clutching a small object like it was part of some game I wasn't supposed to understand. My instincts screamed at me to run, but the hallway felt narrower, tighter, every corner and shadow suddenly threatening. The whisper came next, low and deliberate, my name. Panic surged through me as I realized they weren't scared. They were in control. They were testing me, circling me like predators, patient and deliberate. I lunged for the front door, yanking and pushing, but it wouldn't budge. I slammed my shoulder against it, over and over, heart hammering, mind racing. The older boy stepped closer, calm, almost proud, while the younger stayed at the top of the stairs, smiling in that unnerving, empty way. Every instinct screamed escape, chest heaving, eyes darting across the dimly lit house. Every shadow, every corner, every flicker from the storm outside felt alive with menace. And then it hit me, the danger wasn't the storm, or the shadows, or even the knife. It was them, calm, quiet, patient, watching, waiting, and I was trapped in their game, powerless, completely at their mercy. I finally forced the door open, stumbling out into the pouring rain, drenched and shaking. My legs barely carried me as I ran down the driveway, pounding on a neighbor's door until someone answered. Words tumbled out in frantic bursts. I couldn't form a full sentence, and they quickly called the police while I huddled on the porch, shivering, heart racing, unable to calm myself. When the officers arrived and we returned to the house, it was empty. The kids were gone. Their rooms were neat, the doors locked from the inside, no sign of struggle. I gave my statement repeatedly, but no one seemed to understand or believe what had happened. Hours later, the parents arrived, cheerful, oblivious, completely unaware of the nightmare that had unfolded under their roof. For days afterward, sleep was impossible. Every floorboard creak, every shadow in my apartment made me jump. I kept replaying the older boy's calm, deliberate movements, the younger one's eerie smile, and the way they had silently stalked me. I couldn't tell anyone exactly what happened without sounding insane, so I bottled it up. But the memory didn't fade. The knife, the whispers, the patient menace, they were all still alive in my mind. I never babysat again. I avoided houses, avoided being alone with children I didn't know. Yet even now, late at night, I sometimes swear I hear soft footsteps or whispers that aren't mine. I feel their eyes on me, calm and unblinking, reminding me that some dangers wait quietly, patiently, and strike when you least expect them. Even now, years later, I can feel that night lingering in the quiet corners of my mind. The older boy's calculating eyes, the younger one's unnerving smile. They replay themselves in my thoughts when I'm alone, when the house is dark, when the world feels too still. I still ask myself how I survived, and the answer never comes. I just know I did, and somehow that feels wrong, like escaping was a mistake that should have cost me everything. The parents never noticed anything. To them, it was just a normal night. I've thought about telling them exactly what happened, warning them, but I know they wouldn't understand. How could they? The danger was subtle, patient, almost invisible, and yet, it was real. I was left alone with it, and they walked away, oblivious, trusting the children as if nothing had happened. I don't babysit anymore. I avoid houses, avoid being alone with kids I don't know. But the memory never fades. Sometimes, when everything is silent, I swear I hear soft footsteps or faint whispers calling my name. I feel those eyes on me again, calm, unblinking, patient, reminding me that some threats don't announce themselves. They wait. They observe. They strike when you least expect it. That night taught me something I'll never forget. Danger doesn't always scream or break through doors. Sometimes it looks like a child, standing quietly in the dark, smiling, testing you, seeing exactly how far you'll go before you realize you're trapped. And the scariest part is knowing that some people, some children, are born with the patience to wait for you to find out. I remember the way the house felt the moment I stepped inside. Too quiet, too still, like it was holding its breath. The parents were running late, rushing out with hurried instructions and promises to return soon. 2 kids, a storm brewing outside, and a house that smelled faintly of cleaning supplies and something metallic I couldn't place. The younger one sat on the living room floor, perfectly still, eyes wide, watching me as if I were an intruder. The older child didn't appear immediately. When he finally came down the stairs, he didn't smile, didn't greet me. He just leaned against the railing, eyes sharp, calculating, and for a moment I felt like I was being studied under a microscope. I tried talking, asking about school or hobbies, anything to break the tension, but it felt meaningless. He didn't respond. He just observed. The first little things started subtly. A door I had closed was now slightly open. A toy the younger child had been using was moved to a strange spot. And then I noticed the older boy's reflection in the hallway mirror. He wasn't standing behind me, but I could feel his eyes following me, calm, patient, unblinking. I brushed it off at first, telling myself it was my imagination. But then I heard it, a faint whisper, so soft I almost thought I imagined it. The younger one giggled, low and deliberate, as if confirming something I couldn't understand. And at that moment, I realized I wasn't just babysitting. I was already trapped in the house, under the gaze of 2 children who weren't playing. They were waiting. The night stretched on, and every sound made my nerves jump. The younger one stayed close, but his attention wasn't on me. It was on the corners, the shadows, the ceiling, like he was noticing things I couldn't. Occasionally, he whispered something under his breath, soft, precise, deliberate, and my stomach twisted every time. I tried to distract him with a story or a game, anything to break the eerie silence, but nothing worked. The older boy moved differently. He didn't run or shout. He glided silently through the house, appearing in doorways I hadn't noticed, vanishing and reappearing so quickly it was disorienting. Every time I saw him in a reflection, his eyes were fixed on me, calm, assessing, knowing. It felt like he could read my thoughts, always one step ahead, always testing me. Then the subtle signs escalated. A chair was slightly out of place. A glass I had cleaned earlier was now on the floor, shattered neatly. I double-checked all the doors and windows, locked, but the sense of being trapped didn't leave me. My phone had no signal, the parents were unreachable, and every instinct screamed something was very wrong. By the time it was past 10, panic had fully set in. The wind rattled the windows, the house groaned and shifted around me, every creak and shadow feeling deliberate. The older boy whispered my name softly, almost sweetly, and the younger one giggled from the top of the stairs, calm and unnerving. I realized then that the danger wasn't outside. It had been inside all along, patient, quiet, and waiting for me to notice. I froze when I heard it, a slow, deliberate step behind me. My heart hammered so violently I felt it might burst through my chest. The older boy stood there calm, watching me with those unnervingly sharp eyes. In his hand was something metallic, heavy, catching the dim light in a way that made my stomach drop. The younger one appeared at the top of the stairs, clutching a small object, smiling faintly, unnervingly calm. My instincts screamed at me to run, but the hallway felt narrower, tighter, every shadow now a threat. Then came the whisper, soft, deliberate, low, my name. Panic surged through me. They weren't scared. They were in control. They were testing me, circling me, waiting, patient predators. I lunged for the front door, yanking at the handle, but it wouldn't budge. I slammed my shoulder against it repeatedly, mind racing, heart hammering, every second dragging like hours. The older boy stepped closer, calm, almost proud, while the younger stayed at the top of the stairs, smiling in that empty, precise way that made my blood run cold. I realized then that the danger wasn't the storm, or the shadows, or even the knife. It was them. Quiet, patient, fully aware. And I was completely trapped in their game, powerless and alone. I finally forced the front door open, stumbling into the pouring rain, drenched and trembling. My legs barely carried me as I ran down the driveway, pounding on a neighbor's door until someone answered. I couldn't speak clearly, words tumbled out in frantic bursts. They called the police, and I huddled on the porch, shivering, heart still racing, unable to calm down. When the officers arrived and we returned to the house, it was empty. The kids were gone. Their rooms were neat, the doors locked from the inside, no sign of struggle. I repeated my statement over and over, but no one seemed to understand, or believe, what I had experienced. Hours later, the parents arrived, cheerful and oblivious, completely unaware of the nightmare that had unfolded. Sleep was impossible. Every creak of the floorboards, every shadow in my apartment, made me jump. I kept replaying the older boy's calm, deliberate movements and the younger one's empty, unnerving smile, remembering how they had silently stalked me, testing me. I couldn't tell anyone exactly what had happened without sounding insane, so I bottled it up. But the memory didn't fade, the whispers, the patient menace, the knife, everything. I never babysat again. I avoided houses, avoided being alone with children I didn't know. But even now, late at night, I sometimes swear I hear soft footsteps or whispers that aren't mine. I feel their eyes on me, calm, unblinking, patient, reminding me that some dangers wait quietly, patiently, and strike when you least expect them. Even now, I can feel that night lingering in the quiet corners of my mind. The older boy's calculating eyes, the younger one's unnerving smile. They replay themselves over and over, especially when I'm alone, when the house is dark, when the world feels too still. I still ask myself how I survived, and the answer never comes. I just know I did, and somehow that feels wrong, like escaping was a mistake that should have cost me everything. The parents never noticed anything. To them, it was just another normal night. I've thought about telling them exactly what happened, warning them, but I know they wouldn't understand. How could they? The danger was subtle, patient, almost invisible, and yet it was real. I was left alone with it, and they walked away, oblivious, trusting the children as if nothing had happened. I don't babysit anymore. I avoid houses, avoid being alone with kids I don't know. But the memory never fades. Sometimes, when everything is silent, I swear I hear soft footsteps or whispers calling my name. I feel those eyes on me, calm, unblinking, patient, reminding me that some threats don't announce themselves. They wait. They observe. They strike when you least expect them. That night taught me something I'll never forget. Not all danger looks like a stranger in the dark. Sometimes it looks like a child, standing quietly, smiling, testing you, seeing exactly how far you'll go before you realize you're trapped. And the scariest part is knowing that some people, some children, are born with the patience to wait and watch, and you only notice too late.